Yeah, I mean, and like you said about the Bay Area, not the most like exciting. Like you could go do exciting things in San Francisco, you could go do
Hmm.
exciting things in Berkeley, but yeah, pretty. I mean, Pleasanton in particular is very like
It is the suburbs, capital S.
middle class suburban.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, yeah,
So speak a little bit on your time. I would love to hear about, again, like being an adult working in San Francisco, like in the queer scene there. So you said that you had returned to the Bay Area at one point. And I like,
yeah,
through Turbo Pageant, and through Florida Man, who will be a guest very soon, like have gotten to know a lot of the queens in the Bay Area just through quarantine. And I
yeah,
like even from a distance, I feel that like the vibe there and the community there is so warm and like friendly and cool. And
yeah,
like, did you have
yeah.
a similar experience? Like, at least comparatively, it's very
Well,
warm.
it's kind of funny because I didn't start doing drag until I moved to Chicago.
Okay.
So I was drag adjacent, being like a queer person,
Hmm.
but I also spent a lot of like I spent all of my 20s in a hetero relationship
Right.
as like an open bisexual. um so I was around queer people, but
Hmm.
in my, I first moved to San Francisco in like 99. I was working on Haight Street. I was a punk rocker. I lived in
Hell
a punk
yeah.
house with like five other people. We had fucking, it was moldy, and we'd have punk rockers singing the Templars till 3 a.m. on a fucking Tuesday.
And
Like
none of that
it was
exists
just
in San
chaos.
Francisco anymore. Like, it's
No,
fully cleaned out.
no. I miss it, and I hate being that person who's like, I miss old San Francisco, but it's true.
But it's like I
Um,
even in the couple of times that I went like as a younger person, like I saw
yeah,
the grittiness like fade away, like
yeah,
even as a kid, because like I remember going there when I was like 5 or 6, just with my mom on like a trip,
yeah,
and the sunset, but we were still like exploring the city, and she was
yeah,
like in fight or flight mode. She was like, I need to protect you. This city is
yeah,
rough and tumble, blah blah. And then I remember
yeah,
going on a class trip like maybe 5 or 6 years later, and it just
yeah,
being like the cleanest, most like lovely,
yeah.
like super like simple kind of place.
Okay, so my big thing I tell people is I remember around, I don't know, probably 99 or 2000. Divisadero Street was really rough. And
Hmm.
then I remember going to a punk show. I went to see Slaughter and the Dogs at, I don't know what the club was called back then. But we all went to an after party. A friend lived around the corner, and we almost got mugged just walking the 2.5 blocks to his house. It
Spooky.
was a street that, like, if you got stopped at a stoplight, you were like, are the doors locked? And you'd look both ways.
Right.
So
Hmm.
now my friends live actually right across. You know where the Full House houses are?
Yeah, of course.
That neighborhood used to be unsafe. So
Yeah, it's
my
absolutely.
friends, I mean, it still has its moments, but
Hmm.
my
Didn't
friends
they
live
have all kinds
over
of
there still.
controversy during quarantine with like people gathering in that park?
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't
Yeah,
know.
apparently that was one
Um,
of the like super spreader areas.
oh, I'm not surprised, but
Hmm.
I contrast that with last time I was in San Francisco, or one of the last times within the last 5 years. I went home. I think I was in a band that was touring. I don't fucking know. And my friends live around the same area and went to the local coffee shop, and they were like, hey, do you need anything? And they were like, oh, they have this really good fresh baked bread, and then they make their own almond butter. It's like really
Mm.
good almond butter toast. And I was like, ooh, great. And they brought it to me, and I was like, how much do I owe you? And he was like, $12.
Ugh, no.
I was like, $12 for
Yeah.
toast?
Well, that's
Like,
the thing about the Bay Area and like California in general now, but the Bay Area it's
yeah.
especially bad. Like
Uh-huh.
speaking of road tripping, I did like the whole West Coast. I went from Seattle down to Tijuana a couple years back.
Yeah.
And stopped for a while in Oakland. And was like
Yep.
and wanted to spend a day exploring Oakland and wanted to spend a day exploring San Francisco. But then I went and looked at like the fare prices just to get across the bridge, and it was like it was surge pricing or something, and it was like
Yeah.
$11 to get my car
Yeah.
across there. And then if you want to drive around the bay, it's a 4-hour drive in traffic. So I'm like, I'm gonna hang around Oakland and just like skip it. It'll be totally fine. But yeah, like the way that I feel like the Bay Area is one of the like fastest changing areas that I've ever come across.
Yeah.
Because it's like Denver, of course, is morphing and moving and doing its thing all the time. But I have never like I've visited California at intervals, and I have never seen a place like that was so different each time I visited. Yeah,
absolutely.
And it must just be like the swell of people constantly moving through.
Well, and people think it's absurd that I would leave the Bay Area with perfect weather to move to the frozen tundra of Chicago.
That's my one thing about Chicago is I'm like, I would love to, but it's so fucking cold.
We make it work. We make it work.
Exactly.
Y'all have snow in Denver just as much as we do.
But the storms are like not the same. Like the thing with Colorado is that the snow will last maybe a couple of days. I have never in my life endured a storm in Colorado that was not like too that what we weren't defrosted by the end of the week, you know? But the Midwest, you guys get frozen solid for like a month at a time.
Yeah, the polar vortex last year, I think it was -30, and they said that if you go outside, you have like 3 minutes before you get frostbite or some shit like that.
Oh my God, no. See, that's crazy. And I saw all of you fucking drag queens, all you drag queens still hoofing it around the city.
Yeah, dragon snow fucking sucks. It really does.
Tell me about it. That you've been to Gladys here in Denver. Like that entire sidewalk outside where everybody gathers together to smoke and eat and everything. I mean, with quarantine, I almost miss it, but it turned into a skating rink.
Yeah.
Every single year.
Oh my
God. We would come out there in our heels and just like tap around as lightly as we could.
I think last time I was at Gladys, I was drinking a weed soda with Tammy Brown.
That makes sense. Oh my God, I was there. Yeah, absolutely. Shout out
I had to leave. I had to leave because I had to go do a show across town, and I was so sad.
I also had to leave that show. So shout out to Willow Pill for putting together one of the best shows in Denver.
Willow!
I really hope it comes back. Pillbox, be on the lookout for it if you're ever in Denver. For Pride the year before last, it was Meatball and Tammy Brown starring, and I ended up having to leave because that Pride weekend there was quite a negative drug experience the night before, and so I showed up to Pillbox and I was like, I'm gonna say hello to everybody, I'm gonna watch Tammy Brown perform, I'm gonna say hello to Meatball, and I have to go home and puke and cry.
Were we briefly at the same table?
Yeah, I snuck onto your table for sure because I did not have a reservation.
I was gonna say, wait a second. I remember us sitting together.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, should we go back to the Bay Area?
Yes,
I feel like
please.
I didn't talk about the queer scene there. Okay, let me jump back for a second. So the funny thing is, I've lived in San Francisco off and on for ages. I lived in California till I was 29 years old. So it's funny because I was always around drag, my high school pen pal was Amy or Shrinkle from Sugar Pill.
No way.
She grew up in the Bay Area. Yeah, she
That's
grew up in the Bay
awesome.
Area too. She was a Milpitas one town over.
Mm-hmm.
So through her, I got to meet other queer people. But it's funny because now people that I knew in San Francisco started drag around the same time I started drag. They started in San Francisco. I started in Chicago. So like Franzia Kafka, we were friends before either of us were doing drag, and now we're both doing drag, and we're like, oh my God, this is so great! Because we're both doing drag.
The spread of drag sort of like really started in those mid 2000s, and that's the cool thing is how it popped up in every single city. Like I was talking the other day with et cetera, a drag queen from Australia, and she was like, as much as Drag Race like has its own issues, it is cool that it like sparked a drag scene in like every major city in the world. Yeah. It made...
And small towns too. I mean, I'm in Murray, Kentucky. There's 5 drag queens here.
And that is really impressive to me. So, tell me about these local drag scenes. Like obviously Denver itself is a pretty local drag scene relatively. But there's not a huge amount of opportunity to do things out in like the smaller towns in Colorado. I mean, best case we have like Colorado Springs and stuff. So how is that small town vibe? Is the backstage like friendlier or?
Okay, so I love traveling to perform, and I've done it from like the minute I was even slightly decent at drag. I was
Right.
like, "Hello, book me where you live."
That's where I was
like,
at the start of this year. I was just ready to get going, and then everything shut
yeah, I
down.
feel like we talked about that. I hate
Yeah,
that.
well, I would have been in Chicago in May for sure. Like,
I hate it.
me and Bambi and Liz would have been out there probably crashing at your place or
At my
somebody's.
place. I had my own place. You absolutely could have.
Exactly.
Although I was very far from all the drag, but yeah. So I haven't really. I've been in cities for the most part, but like the first show of the tour was Kokomo, Indiana, and I'm thinking, what the fuck is doing drag in Kokomo, Indiana gonna be like? It's Indiana. It's an hour from Indianapolis. It's not a city.
Have you seen The Prom on Netflix? Famous song lyric.
I've not seen it yet.
Don't be gay in Indiana. Like, that's an entire scene of the movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I've done drag also in Biloxi, Mississippi a lot. And I remember the first time I told my I've been there 2 or 3 times now. I have a drag daughter down there now. And I remember the first time I told my Republican grandma, and she was like, "Is that safe?"
Well, that's my thought is like, yeah, I mean, just the passage from the car to the front door of the bar, I would be scared. Like, I mean, even coming from a state that has lots of like anti-gay white supremacist politics, I'd be even more scared, you know?
It's definitely like the patrons of Kokomo were really lovely and really sweet. The patrons at Paducah were as well. You know, you kind of realize that this is the minority of the people in this area, and they live there for one reason or another. And this is like their escape and their opportunity to be around like-minded people.
Right. I imagine the audiences are grateful to be there and to be surrounded by queer people. Yeah.
But like, my friends here in Murray were saying, you know, their shows were sold out here, which was very surprising. There is a university here, but
okay, yeah. I mean, drag is going to thrive wherever there's a college.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they did a show, and there were these 3 like openly like Trump supporting people in the audience, and they were like a little freaked out. And like,
well, it's like, how did you get there? Like,
how'd you get there? Bitch, they were gay.
Well, and they were there to see some drag.
A drag show.
Well, it's I was about to be like, what? Why? How? But like, there's no applying reason to gay Trump supporters. Like, there's no logic to it at all.
No, my friend I'm staying with here in Kentucky, their bosses own an upholsterer. I should not give all these details, but they own a business.
Nobody's gonna listen to this.
And they're Trumpers. And it's just like crazy because, like, you know, he's got to go to work every day as like a married gay man, and they're like a married gay couple, and be like, okay.
I just like, have you spoken to a gay Trumper before? Because it's like I can plead a little bit of like ignorance in that, like, I honestly haven't been able to sit down and like level with or pick the brain of a gay Trump supporter. Like, do you have even an inkling of how that could happen? What their reasons are? How do you claim a proud gay, like a pride over your gay identity as well as identifying with Donald Trump? Like,
I think it's hard because it's like you and I live in cities. Like, we are city people. So we don't really know what it's like in a rural area where maybe you're just trying to survive or you're just trying to fit in, and everyone around you supports this person. But a lot of people also don't delve into politics enough, and they just blindly go with the majority. Right. So if you're surrounded, I mean, I've seen like 10-foot Trump flags here, you know?
Yeah.
So like
the size of, an American flag. Yeah.
Well, the thing in Kentucky is like, yeah, absolutely. Because if you own property on the side of the highway, it's your private property.
For you to advertise whatever you want. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a big thing in Colorado. Is just having
definitely
huge signs for like the most horrific political ideals. Like,
absolutely.
Truly like pictures of like dead fetuses, like and like unflattering politicians' portraits all over the side of the road.
No, same out here. You know, and like I always think I know. I'm like, oh, I've been to Biloxi. Oh, I've been to New Orleans. All that. You know, I think I know what like the South is like. But this trip has definitely